Thank you for joining me. If you're here for the first time, welcome back. If you're here for the second time or third time, this is Catherine's Book Club. We are reading classic works of English literature. This is to help intermediate and advanced English learners to understand more of the vocabulary and the cultural references in older English books and poems and stories. So today we will continue reading Bram Stoker's vampire novel Dracula, which is the original Dracula story. If you missed the first video, you can find that video on my YouTube channel, which is linked from my About page here on Twitch. Because I'm not a Twitch partner, I can't store many older videos for very long. So if you missed a video before, please check me out on YouTube and you can find it there. Alright, so last time we just got started reading Dracula. We are still in the first few paragraphs of chapter 1, and today we're going to continue with that for a while. So here we are. If you remember, this is an epistolary novel, which means it's written as if the characters were writing letters and diary entries. And there are a few different characters in this novel. The protagonist and the main character in this story is called Jonathan Harker. And we have started reading Jonathan Harker's journal. He is I think he's a young solicitor's clerk, a young lawyer's clerk or lawyer's assistant. He has been sent on a business trip from London to Transylvania, and in the beginning of his journal, he is traveling by train and then by carriage across Europe from west to east. So he started in London, then he came to Vienna, then to Budapest, and then now he is in Bistritz, which is a city he's never visited before. And you'll find that the longer Jonathan travels, the more difficult his travels become. The trains are getting later and the people are getting stranger as he goes on. And we also know that someone important in Jonathan Harker's life is a woman named Mina. He's mentioned her 2 times. Once when he was talking about giving her a recipe for chicken, and once when he said later he will talk over his travels with her. So we know that Mina is a very important person to Jonathan. We will meet Mina later. All right, so let's get started. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, and Sekalis in the east and north. If I have mispronounced any of those words, please excuse me. I am going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. Mem, or memorandum, I must ask the Count all about them. So in this paragraph, Jonathan is telling us a little bit about Transylvania, which is the place where he's going to. Transylvania is, of course, a real place. I want to say that it's in Romania currently. At the time, it was part of a different country. And he's talking about the people who live there. In the population, the group of people living in Transylvania, in the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities. You probably know that your nationality, that is the nation that you are from or the people you're related to. So 4 distinct nationalities. Distinct means different from each other. So there are 4 different ethnic groups living in Transylvania. So in the south are the Saxons and the Wallachs or Valachs. I think another region in that area is called Wallachia or Wallachia. And the Wallachs are the descendants of the Dacians. That means that originally, long ago, there was a group of people called the Dacians. They don't live here anymore, but their children's children's children are called the Wallachians. Okay? And then we have Magyars in the west. And of course, Magyars are the same people who live in modern-day Hungary. And then we have the Szekelyes in the east and the north. So in the east, Szekelyes, and in the north, Szekelyes. Okay, and Jonathan says, I am going among the latter. So the latter means the last ones that I named. Okay, this app is still not working right, which is really not very good. So I had no trouble with it before. Let's see. This little pencil tool that I've been using has given me trouble the last 2 times, so I might need to find another alternative to that. This is really trash. That's frustrating, because I thought that was a good solution, but apparently not. Okay. Let's see. I guess I could reinstall it. Yeah, this is garbage. Okay, sorry guys. I suppose I will not use this anymore. I wonder if I can use Twitch's screenwriting app to do that instead. Kind of. Can I zoom in? I'm still very new to this. Okay. Anyway. I see that one person is watching, and it may or may not be my fiance. If you are, hi Franny. If you're not, hello whoever you are, and welcome. Alright, well, I really liked that pencil thing, so let's see what we can do. Okay. Alright, so the important word in this sentence is latter. The latter means the last one, or the last group he talked about. So Jonathan has told us about the Saxons, the Wallachs, the Magyars, and the Szekelyes. And the Szekelyes are the last group of people he talked about. And so that's what he means when he says the latter. So Jonathan is going among the Szekelyes. So he's going into the north. Jesus, okay. He's going into the north or the eastern part of Transylvania. All right. And he says, I'm going among the latter who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. So the Szekelyes claim, they say that originally their ancestors were the Huns. You've probably heard of Attila the Hun, very famous conqueror. Attila the Hun. Famous for violently conquering large areas of Europe, and whether fairly or not, they have a reputation for being extremely violent and extremely cruel. I, of course, don't know if that's true or not, but if an English writer in the late 19th century says that these people he's going to visit claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns, he's saying that this is a pretty dark place, and the people here tend to be a little bit scary. Okay, this may be so for when the Magyars, that would be the Hungarians, when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. So first there were the Szekelyes, who are also called the Huns, same people. And then later on, the Magyars came in to take over the same place, and the Huns were already there. And then we also have these other groups of people here. All right, so now we move on to another topic. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians. I don't know if you know the word superstition. A superstition is a kind of magical belief. Maybe you believe that the number 13 is unlucky, or that you shouldn't open an umbrella inside the house, or you should throw salt over your shoulder if you spill some salt on the floor. These are superstitions. And so Jonathan has read that every known superstition in the world is collected into the horseshoe of the Carpathians. He's talking about the Carpathian or the Carpathian mountains. And he calls them a horseshoe because they are shaped in a kind of U. A horseshoe, of course, is that thing you put on your horse's foot to keep it from oh my God, come on. To keep it from hurting its feet. Anyway, not important. Oh my God, guys, the internet today. Okay. So, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. A whirlpool is a big spinning pool of water. So he's saying that this place is extremely magical, and that there's lots of magic and mysticism there, and that people believe lots of very strange things. If so, my stay may be very interesting. And then he's got a memorandum to ask the Count all about the local superstitions. The Count is the person he's going to visit. We will find out later that he is talking about Count Dracula, who of course Jonathan does not know yet, and he doesn't know anything about this guy. Okay, let's move on from this. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. Don't be distracted by this word. Its original meaning was just strange and unusual. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it. He means something to do with his strange dreams. Or it may have been the paprika. Remember that he, in an earlier paragraph, he talked about eating a chicken done up with red pepper, right? Chicken with paprika. And he's saying that maybe the paprika gave him bad dreams. For I had to drink up all the water in my carafe, in his bottle, and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept. So finally, after he was awake all night, it was almost morning, it was towards morning, he fell asleep. Towards morning I slept and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. I had for breakfast more paprika, and a sort of porridge of maize flour, which they said was mamaliga, and eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish, which they call impletata. Memorandum, get recipe for this also. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather, it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? Okay, so we learn about Jonathan's night, right? We know that he did not sleep well, and that he had all sorts of queer dreams. He had very many strange dreams. And of course, this is a horror novel, so we can imagine some kind of magical thing is probably happening to Jonathan. A dog howling all night, that would definitely be a bad luck sign in a lot of cultures. He could not sleep well because there was a dog howling under his window. Let's try this. Does it work now? No. For some reason, on this particular page, I can only use this pencil on the left half. Let's try it again. Nope, it just will not work from here over, and I don't know why. Okay. Before the next stream, I'm going to have to look for another tool for this. It's very annoying. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so he couldn't sleep, and he's a very practical and very sensible young person, and he says, oh, you know, probably it was just the food. I ate spicy food, so that gave me strange dreams. So in the morning, he is sound asleep. He says, I must have been sleeping soundly. He means he was sleeping deeply. And for breakfast, more paprika, more spicy pepper, and a sort of porridge of maize flour. Porridge, you probably either know it or have it in your country. A porridge is a soft, hot food made of grain, and it is often eaten for breakfast, but not always. His was made of maize flour, which is also called corn flour, and the name of this porridge is mamaliga. I guess that's how you say it. And eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, okay? Eggplant in modern British English is called an aubergine, which is the French word. The English word is eggplant, and it's called that because they are shaped like eggs. So eggplant stuffed with forcemeat. I want to say that forcemeat is pate. No, it's not. It is a mixture of lean meat with fat. Okay, so you take meat and you take fat and you grind it together. That's not a word that I've really heard recently, so don't worry too much if you don't know that one. Okay. A very excellent dish, which they call impletata, and he's made a note for himself, memorandum, get recipe for this also. He wants these recipes so that he can give them to his girlfriend. He's hoping she can cook them for him at home. All right, I had to hurry breakfast. He has to eat his breakfast quickly. So in this last section, we're learning about how he runs to catch the train. I had to hurry breakfast for, which in this paragraph means because, the train started a little before 8. Or rather, he says, I mean to say, it ought to have done so. So ought to is another way to say should. So the train was supposed to start a little before 8 o'clock. The plan was that the train would start a little before 8 o'clock, but it didn't. He said the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so, for, which again means because. After rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. So he runs very quickly to catch the train. The train does not leave on time, however. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. Have you seen the word punctual before? If someone is punctual, it means that they are always on time. And so, of course, if you are unpunctual, it means you are never on time. So Jonathan is saying that in London, the trains are always on time. In Vienna, the trains are usually on time. In Budapest, they're sometimes on time. And the further east you go, the trains get worse and worse and worse. So he's saying, what if I go to China? If I go all the way east, China, of course, was over here for him, then what ought they to be? What should the trains be like in China if they get later and later and later as you go farther to the east? He's just joking a little bit there. Okay? All right, let's read this whole paragraph and then we'll go over the different parts of it. All day long, we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams, which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers. But others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet. But of course there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts, nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old Oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting natural self. Okay, so the obvious of this paragraph is that, is that Jonathan Harker, he's from London, he's from the late 19th century, and he's a bit xenophobic. So this paragraph, he speaks in kind of unflattering words about the people that he passes as he's traveling. Sorry about that. It's the way that he thought. Not a great character. Probably the author was a bit xenophobic too, but that is something that we have to encounter when we read old books. Okay. So in the first part of this paragraph, he talks about the countryside. He talks about the scenery that he saw while he was traveling on the train. Let me get some more water. Okay. So he says, all day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. To dawdle is to move very slowly. You're not in any kind of a hurry. So remember that the train is always late, so the train probably is also moving very slowly. So this is a long, slow trip on a 19th century train. So they're traveling slowly through the countryside. It's very easy to look around and see the scenery. So some things that he saw. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills. If something is steep, it goes up very sharply. This would be a steep hill. This hill, not very steep. Okay? So you would see towns or castles on the tops of steep hills. That's an unfortunate looking picture. Let's erase that. Such as we see in old missals. A missal is a kind of book, and it's a church book specifically. And a long time ago, all church books were written by hand. You can see that this one has been copied by hand in red ink. And there are lots of pictures in it. And Jonathan Harker is saying that if you look in old books like this, you often see pictures of cute little towns and castles up on the tops of high mountains. So he's saying the countryside is, it looks like a man in a hat, doesn't it? He's saying that the countryside is so beautiful that it looks like an illustration from an old book. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams. You probably know what a river is. I don't know if you know what a stream is. A stream is like a very small river. Okay, rivers and streams, which seemed, so it appears, it looks like, from the wide stony margin on each side of them, to be subject to great floods. The margin is the outside part. For example, this is the margin of the page that we are on. And Jonathan is saying that if the stream is here, then on the outside of the stream, along the borders, I can't use my fingers, along the borders of these streams are wide areas that are just made, why is this stream red? That are just made of stone. There's no grass here. It's a stony margin. And Jonathan is saying that he thinks that there are big floods. So there are times when the water rises up, like this. And the reason why he thinks that is that it takes a lot of water running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. So he's saying that because the stream has a stone margin, because there are, yeah, this is an old-fashioned way of saying it, stream, stone, bank, we would more often say. Saying that because there's lots of stone around the outside of the stream, then there are probably lots of floods. There's no way for the grass to grow. The plants are washed away by the water. Okay, so then we move move on from the countryside, and the rest of the paragraph, Jonathan is talking about the people that he sees, and he doesn't really think much about them. He says some kind of unfortunate things. Okay. At every station, groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of stuff. Train is passing lots of train stations, lots of stops, and at every station he can see the different people. And the people are in all sorts of attire, which is a way to describe someone's clothing. So the people wear lots of different kinds of clothing. Remember that Jonathan told us earlier that there are 4 different nationalities living in this country. And there are probably other ones living there too who are just visiting or traveling. And so he can see lots of different clothing on the people in the train stations because they come from many different places. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or that I saw coming through France and Germany. So a peasant is a country person or a farmer. So let's look for a 19th century peasant. So an English peasant or a West European peasant would wear very simple clothes, probably trousers, probably a shirt if you're talking about a man. A woman would wear a simple skirt, a simple blouse. There's a young French peasant. But other very picturesque jackets and you probably know the basic clothing vocabulary: trousers, hats, and jackets that you put on like this. Others were very picturesque. He uses this word twice in this paragraph, picturesque. It's down here as well. And you can see that picturesque has the word picture in it. So if something is picturesque, it means it looks like a picture. They look like people you would not really expect to see in real life. So Jonathan thinks that some of the people he sees in his travels are very strange. Here he's rude. He says the women looked very pretty. The women looked pretty except when you got near them. So he's saying from far away the women look pretty, but when you get close to the women, he does not like the way they look. Jonathan likes only English women. He doesn't like other women. Okay, but they were very clumsy about the waist. In modern English, clumsy means that you are awkward. You have lots of accidents. You drop things. You bump into things. But an older meaning of the word means too big, not graceful, not beautiful. So he's saying that the women are a little bit chubby. My beautiful picture here. All right, I'm not sure what these pictures are. They all had full white sleeves of some kind or other. The sleeve is the part of your shirt that covers the arm. And he's saying the sleeves that the women are wearing on their shirts are very big and they are white. They all had full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts. And a belt is something that goes around your waist right here. Oh, by the way, the waist is, excuse me. The waist is this part of your body. Can you see it? Oh, you can't see my mouse. Excuse me. The waist is right here on your body. It's not showing up, is it? Is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. That part kind of in the middle. So most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet. So let's look for a 19th century Transylvanian peasant woman. I don't see anything like what he's describing. Let's look for a 19th century Hungarian peasant woman, someone from Hungary. Maybe he means this. I think this is what, it says it's Wallachian folk dress. So we can see that this woman, she's wearing a belt around her waist. She's wearing very full white sleeves. She has very big white sleeves. And then she has strips of something. She has long, thin pieces of some kind of fabric that is coming down from her belt. And he says, most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet. And of course we mean a tutu. Ballet tutu. Right? The ballet tutu that dancers would wear would have lots of little pieces of fabric. But he says, of course, they had petticoats under them. A petticoat is a skirt that goes under another skirt. So the women are wearing petticoats, they're wearing belts, these kind of ribbons that come down from them. Not very, but he thinks it's interesting. Alright, and the rest of this whole paragraph is about the Slovaks, which is funny. I guess he thought these guys were very unusual looking. Let's look for a 19th century Slovak clothing. So I guess we're looking at guys in clothing like this, maybe. Maybe this guy. Doesn't really look like he was describing. Says the strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest. Barbarian is a bit rude. You don't really say this about people from another country, but they used to say it a lot. It means that you are from a wild country where people do crazy things and their manners are not very good. So the Slovaks, he said, were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, like a cowboy he's seen in the US. Bram Stoker thought that cowboys were pretty interesting. Their big cowboy hats, great baggy, dirty white trousers. Dirty white, he's got hyphenated. That means that they are white in color, but they're not white. They're kind of a yellow-white color. But it's a little rude to call people's trousers dirty white. White linen shirts. And enormous heavy leather belts. There's that word belt again. Nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. Slovak belt, maybe? I guess that's what he's talking about. I feel like maybe he's misattributed this. Or maybe there just aren't any good examples online. I've never quite seen a picture of what he is described. Maybe this is what he means here. I think this is it. Okay. So you see he's got a very wide belt. And then he's got trousers that are a darker color than his shirt, which is white. I don't see his cowboy hat though. So we just have to take his word for it. Anyway, so Jonathan Harker thinks the Slovak guys are very strange looking. He says they wore high boots. Their boots were very tall, with their trousers tucked into them, and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. Of course, your mustache is under your nose like this. On my beautiful picture. So they had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. He says they are very picturesque. Again, that word, it means they look very strange, but do not look prepossessing. If something is prepossessing, it looks good, it looks positive, it looks like it will be a good thing. He says they do not look prepossessing, which basically means when he sees these guys, he gets a bad feeling. On the stage, he means if this were a play, they would be set down at once as some Oriental band of brigands. Orient means of the East. No. So he's saying for a play, the Slovak peasant men that he's looking at in their costumes, they would be playing criminals. They would be playing dangerous people who won't hurt you. But even though they look like that, he says that's not how they really are. They are, however, I am told, people tell me they are very harmless. Harmless means not dangerous, and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. If you are wanting in something, you don't have it. So he's saying they don't have natural self-assertion. That means they're not brave and they don't ask for things that he wants. So he's saying these Slovak men, they look very scary and they look like criminals, but actually they're very weak and shy and not scary at all. So kind of rude in another way. Anyway, so that was Jonathan Harker's opinion of the countryside. And now we come to this place, Bistritz, which is where he's writing his diary entry from tonight. He says, "It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. It has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease." So in this paragraph, he tells us about the town of Bistritz. I'm just going to say it with my American accent. I don't know the proper way to say the place name. Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place. So this town is very interesting, and they get to this town on the dark side of twilight. I'm sure you know the word twilight from the book. Twilight is a time of day. Twilight sky. Twilight is a time of day when the sun is down, but there is still a little light in the sky. And you can see that sometimes, like in this picture, twilight is still quite light, but it can also be quite dark. So he's saying it's on the darker side of twilight. It's getting quite late when they finally get to this town, Bistritz. And now he's going to tell us about Bistritz. Being practically on the frontier. The frontier is the outside edge of a country's territory. It's very far away from the capital city, and there's not a lot of safety. There aren't very many police. It's difficult to get supplies because the roads aren't very good. So Bistritz is an isolated place. It's far away from other cities. He says it is practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. Pass is a gap between 2 mountains that lets you pass from one side to the other. So we've got Bistritz here, and then over here is Bukovina, which is just a different region. Let's find Bukovina. Bukovina map. Here we go. Bukovina Bistrita, and then you can see the mountains are here. And he's saying that there is a pass in the mountains. There's a road through the mountains from Bistritz into Bukovina, but it is at the very outside edge of Transylvania. And so again, we're learning that Jonathan Harker is very far away from anything that would make him feel safe and comfortable. And especially we know that if anything bad happens to Jonathan Harker, he's not going to have any kind of help. He's out in the middle of nowhere. So Bistritz is practically on the frontier. The Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. He means Bistritz, this town. It has had a very stormy existence. So storms, you know what they are. Storms mean bad weather. We mean thunder. We mean lightning. we mean danger. So if a place has had a stormy history, we don't mean that the weather is stormy, but we mean that the history has been very dark and a lot of dangerous things have happened. So Bistritz, it has not been a peaceful place. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. So one bad thing that happens in Bistritz, the stormy history of Bistritz. So one terrible thing that happened. Fires 50 years ago. 5 occasions. That means 5 different times there were terrible fires in this town. So that's one bad thing that happened. And also, at the very beginning of the 17th century, that means the 1800s, at the very beginning of the 17th century, it had a siege of 3 weeks. If you are interested in military history, you probably know what a siege is. A siege is when an army is trying to get into a town. The town is well protected, and so the army, they just wait outside for the people to starve, right? So Bistritz, this town, it experienced a siege about 100 years ago that was 3 weeks long, and the town lost 13,000 people. So I guess this is more of a city than a town. The casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. So another bad thing that happened was a siege, which was about 100 years ago, and 13,000 died. That's a lot of people in the 1800s. And it said that the casualties of war proper were assisted by famine and disease. A casualty is when somebody is injured or somebody is killed. Of course, in a war, people are often injured, they often die. War proper means, the actual fighting in the war, the actual battles. And he's saying that the casualties of war proper were assisted, they were helped by these 2 things, by famine and by disease. Disease means sickness, like a pandemic, and famine means no food. Famine. Right? Famine is starvation because there is no food. If your city is under siege, a lot of people will get sick because you have no fresh water and no medicine, and a lot of people will die of hunger. And all of these bad things happened in this town of Bistritz. But they happened a long time ago, right? It has had a very stormy existence, but right now it's just a town where he is staying for the night before he goes to visit Count Dracula. This is the last town that Jonathan Harker will stay in before he visits Dracula. And Dracula told him where to go. It says, Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned, for of course I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door, I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman, a usual peasant dress, white undergarment with a long front and back of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close, she bowed and said, "The Herr Englishman?" "Yes," I said, "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. Okay, we'll read what the letter says in a minute. So Jonathan is not going to go to Dracula's house right yet. He's going to stay in this hotel tonight, and the hotel is called the Golden Krone Hotel. He stays in the Golden Krone because Count Dracula had directed him to go there. His host, Dracula, told him to go to this hotel, that it was a good place. And Jonathan says he found this hotel to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned. Okay? Delight is happiness. If something is to your great delight, you are very happy that it happens this way. So Jonathan Harker went to the Golden Krone Hotel. He looked at the hotel, and to his great delight, this means something that made him very happy, was that the hotel was thoroughly old-fashioned. It was completely old-fashioned, which means it was not modern. He did not want to stay in a modern hotel because he wanted to learn more about the place where he was visiting. He says, of course, I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. So the Golden Krone Hotel is a very old and a very traditional place, and Jonathan Harker is happy about that because he's a tourist and he wants to see the way that people actually live in this country. Okay? I was evidently expected. Evidently means apparently. It means it looks like, it was clear that he was expected. It means they were waiting for him at this hotel. They knew that he was coming. For, which of course is because, when I got near the door, I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress. Cheery means you're very happy. You're in a good mood. She's a nice lady. The usual peasant dress, white undergarment with long double apron front and back of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. So she's wearing a white dress, and over this white dress she's wearing a long tight apron. And almost too tight for modesty means, ooh, it's a little bit tight there. In England, they would not wear something so tight. They were wearing looser clothes at this time. All right. So remember that Jonathan says he has a smattering of German. He knows a little bit of German, and he doesn't know how he could have survived if he did not know this German. And you can see that the woman says to him, the Herr Englishman. Herr means Mr., so we can guess that they are speaking in German, because Herr is German for Mr. Okay, so they're speaking German. And the woman at the hotel, she goes and she finds an old man. Elderly means old. She's an elderly woman. She's an old woman. She gave some message to an old man in white shirt sleeves. Just a white shirt sleeves. Just means he's not wearing a coat. Not important, but that's what that means if you read that description in a book. He's just wearing his shirt, okay? An elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went but immediately returned with a letter. So we're just going to read this letter, and that's going to be it for today. This is the letter that Dracula sent. My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula. So the hotel owner brings a letter to Jonathan Harker. The letter is from Dracula. The letter says, my friend, welcome to the Carpathians, or the Carpathians, so welcome to the mountains. I am anxiously expecting you. Anxious means you're very excited. He says, I am looking forward to seeing you. I'm very, very happy you're here. I'm very excited to see you. I am expecting you, so I know you will come soon. Sleep well tonight. I think you know what that means. 3 tomorrow. By 3, we mean in the older sense of 3 o'clock p.m., okay? Not a.m. So if you are from Europe, you might say 15 o'clock. That's what we mean, okay? At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. Diligence in modern English means it means that you always do what you are supposed to do. That's not what we're talking about here. He's talking about a carriage. He's talking about a regular carriage, a regular wagon that travels from place to place. So it's a passenger wagon, and it travels from city to city every day or every week at the same time. And so Count Dracula says, at 3 tomorrow, at 15 o'clock, the diligence will start for Bukovina. Remember, we have Bistritz here. Then we have the mountains. Bukovina is over here of the pass. He said, place on it is kept for you. That means that there's a seat on the wagon. A ticket is available for Jonathan Harker, so you should get on this wagon, get on this carriage. At the, remember, this is the pass. It's the opening in the mountains. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you and bring you to me. So Jonathan is supposed to travel in this diligence, in this wagon from Bistritz to the Borgo Pass. But at the Borgo Pass, Dracula's carriage, which is a beautiful kind of car pulled by horses, Dracula's carriage will be waiting and will bring him to Dracula. So we can guess Count Dracula lives somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains. He does not live in Bukovina. So Jonathan Harker is going to get off of the wagon. He's going to get onto the carriage, and the carriage will take Jonathan to see his host. And Dracula says, I trust, that means I believe and I hope, I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend Dracula. Okay? So I'm going to stop here for this week. And next Sunday, we will continue from the 4th of May, which is Jonathan's second diary entry. Of course, if you want to read ahead, you're welcome to do so and add some questions that we can answer in our next session. And again, if you want to see last week's video, that's available on my YouTube channel. So thank you very much for joining me in this broadcast. It was very nice talking to you, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.